precious holy word. Deeper, dear, every day in Jesus, till all conflict past finds me conquer and in his own image perfected at last. Oh, dear, I pray and hard every day. Wise or blessed Lord, in thy precious holy word. Deeper yet I pray. That song was suggested last night. For a reason. We had fun yesterday. Murray and me, we got to play in the sandbox with bigger toys, and it was fun. And we knew we had to go deeper to achieve what we wanted to achieve. And so it is in the life of a Christian. We got to go deeper to achieve what we want to achieve. In His Word, are we going to reach a plateau that we're going to be happy with and kind of stay there? I don't think a Christian can do that. I believe my grandfather was asked when he was in his 90s. So by now, you have achieved it all. You know everything. He says, no. I'm still learning. And so it is in the Christian life. We need to dig a little deeper. Psalms chapter 19. Verse 14. And this is one area in life where I need to go deeper. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Have you ever said something that you regretted saying? I have. Many times I look back and say, oh, if only had I kept my mouth shut. Or said something nicer. If only, but it's too late. It's too late. In James we read that it says that birds and animals, they've all been tamed, but the tongue no man can tame. We'll read that passage yet too, but and then I was thinking, you know what? So I take it to be nice, to be kind, to say the right thing, to say kind things. It takes the Holy Spirit, the power of God, to indwell us, to guide us. And what we just read that says, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart. So a lot of things that we do say, they're preconceived ideas, thoughts that we've had before we say them. So with the help of the Holy Spirit, I believe that we can train ourselves to yes. And the Bible also says to be slow to speak. So think about what we're going to say. Is it going to be kind or rude or critical and all that good stuff? It's so easy to say critical things about people. But believe it or not, Loewen brothers, they sang a song that there's a little good in everybody. So focus on that. James chapter 3, verse 1. 1 to 10. Not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. Ah, there you go, teachers. You're going to be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses and make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants it to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and creatures of the sea are being tamed and have been tamed by man, but no man can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers, this should not be. As children, we sang the song and still do, "Oh, be careful, little tongue, what we say." That applies to everybody. We need to be careful. Proverbs 10:19. When words are many, sin is not absent, but he who holds his tongue is wise. So, if you're about to say something mean or nasty, just grab your tongue, hold it. Just with your hand, hold it. Oh, it's got to be literal, no? Proverbs 16:24. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. So in the avenue of words, of talking, let's go deeper. And I'm talking precisely to myself. You're dismissed for Sunday school.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome here. Hope you had a good morning. I've enjoyed it so far. Lots of good discussion. Lots of good things we've heard. God speak to us through His Word in Sunday school and devotions, even in songs. So, it's a good day. Love these seasons. I think everybody's enjoying the fall weather. I love it as the seasons come and go. Always good. Another thing I don't love so much as time goes on is I feel like as I get older, I have more sore backs. I don't know if it's correlation or not, but it seems to happen. This morning before we start, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for another day here that we can gather together as dear children, as a family, as brothers and sisters, and be encouraged and worship you in this setting here. And I pray that it could just encourage us for the week ahead and the days ahead, that we could go out as a body, as an unstoppable force in the world around us, just doing the work of your kingdom as you've called us and equipped us to do. Pray this in your name. Amen. So this morning, just for a message, what I want to share with you here is I feel like it's maybe a little bit different topic for me. It's not one I generally am drawn to. You know, we often like to study things and and talk about things that are like interesting, inspiring. And don't get me wrong, this story is. But I think it kind of came about in a little different way. I was reading it, and I read this passage, and it was one that, you know, maybe you read one that makes you feel uncomfortable, or maybe it talks about something you don't feel you understand, or it uses some tough language, and it's hard to digest, whatever the cause is, it just might not be your favorite one. So I kind of felt that way about this one, but as I read it a few weeks ago, I was like, maybe that's an opportunity to study it a little bit and to, you know, tackle it and kind of like face your fears kind of thing. I mean, it's not that bad. It's not that drastic, don't worry. But just kind of along that vein of thought. And so I thought, yeah, I'll do it. Let's do it. And so the other thing about it too is I believe the Word of God is inspired, right? And it's profitable. And so there are portions of it that we may not understand. There are portions of it that we may not like. But I think it's there for a purpose. It has a purpose. And so, well, the trick is to figure out what that purpose is, right? So I think it's good to look at the story here. My attempt anyways. I hope that it can speak to you this morning as it has to me. This story is found in Matthew 25. It is one of the parables, and it is the parable of the talents. So the beginning of chapter 25 talks about the parable of the wise and foolish virgins, and I won't get into that one, but it's a good story. I think it tells us to watch and be ready for Christ's return. Be ready for when Jesus comes back, and it implies that you know, once he's back, once the door is shut, you don't have another chance. Like, you got to be ready. And if you're not ready, it's going to be too late. A story of the virgins. So, that one tells us the importance of being ready, but how do you be ready? So I think the parable of the talents, right after that, tells us how to be ready. So that's good. That's good information. Let's just dig into it. Let's start reading in verse 14. It says, "For it will be like a man," and this is the kingdom of heaven. In the beginning of the chapter, he talks about the kingdom of heaven, and it's a continuation of it. He says, "For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away." So here we see something that's probably common back in the day here, where a man owned a bunch of property or whatever, and he's leaving, going on a journey, and so he entrusts it to his servants, people to take care of it, to manage it, to make sure it does well. I mean, it's kind of details we're not given in the story, but it's pretty easy to assume and understand that. And so he gives them talents. One guy 5, another guy 2, another guy 1, according to their abilities, okay? The guy with 1, obviously, he figured couldn't handle 5, but the one with 5, needed a whole bunch or was really good. Well, whatever the case, different amounts, different people. What is a talent? A talent is a weight, I believe. And so if you're talking about a weight of gold or whatever, the monetary value can differ depending on the value of the weight of your material, right? So it's definitely money that he's talking about here in this story, but I think an application of this parable, it is much more than money. It can be money, but I think it's any of our resources that we're given in life, whether that's time or money or abilities, how we use the word talent, our physical abilities, or authority. All these different things that we have are resources, I think, is what he's talking about in this story. Now, as to the amount of money in this story here, there's some different opinions or interpretations of what they think how much money it's worth. But a lot of people said it is very likely that a talent was equal to what a day laborer would make on a normal wage in 15 to 20 years. 15 to 20 years of making money for a kind of average worker is what 1 talent is worth. So that is not a small amount of money, value. Work for something for 15, 20 years. That's what this one guy was given 1 of. Another one was given 2, another one 5. So we in the story here, we think, oh, this poor guy just got 1. But it was not an insignificant amount. It was a lot of money, even just for the one guy, right? Big amount. Different, but not insignificant. If we keep going to verse 16, it describes what they did with this money. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. So, pretty plain and simple, the first 2 guys, we're kind of going to group them together because they're very similar, and the third guy is very different. But the first 2 guys, it says they went at once. They immediately went and did something about it. They started trading it, they started working with it, investing it, whatever it was. They increased what they had immediately. There's no waiting around. They had a job to do, and they did it. Like, we could say a lot of good things about these first 2 servants. They were just responsible, obedient, and ready to give an account to their master when he came back. The third guy, not so much, is a big contrast. And we can kind of question his motives and wonder, like, why did he do this? There's some things in this story that are kind of very confusing and complexing and kind of make you think a little bit. And we'll find out more, but there's a big contrast. He basically did nothing. He hid it. He dug a hole in the ground and hid it, like made it disappear. He didn't do anything with it. What good is that, right? It's kind of like if you're reading a story or watching a movie, you see something happen to a character or see a certain character do something, and you're like, bad things are going to happen to that guy. He's in for it. He's got some bad things coming. You can just feel it. It's kind of like this guy in the story, the third guy. He's not on a good road here, is the feeling I would get. Let's keep going in verse 19. Now after a long time, the master of these servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. So again, two similar responses here. Well, let's just look at them a little bit. After a long time, it said the master came back. So it took a while for him to come back. Well, I believe the master here is God or Jesus, and he is in the story like we are waiting for him to return, right? We are the servants, and we're waiting for him to return. Does it ever feel like it's taking a long time for him to return? People have thought this hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years ago. His disciples were waiting, ready for him to return when he left them, right? And it can feel like a long time for him to return. And it did so to these people in this story here. Didn't matter. They stuck with it. They immediately acted on it, and they just waited. And it took a long time, but they might have questioned whether he was ever coming back. Might have questioned if something happened to him, if he died or something. I don't know. But it took a long time. But when he did come back, they were ready, and we see the answer that the master gives here. We can see what the master was after. He wasn't after a certain percentage profit. He wasn't after a certain amount of money. At least he didn't say that at all. He said, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Those are the character qualities he was looking for in his servants when he entrusted his property and his possessions to. He wanted someone that was good and faithful. And he commended them for it. He rewarded them for it. He says, "You've been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." There's a bunch of different things here we can go over and think about. Spurgeon has some quotes here I came across. He said, "It is not well done, thou good and brilliant servant, for perhaps the man never shone at all in the eyes of those who appreciate glare and glitter. It is not well done, thou great and distinguished servant, for it is possible that he was never known beyond his native village." And another place he also said, "It is better to be faithful in the infant school than to be unfaithful in a noble class of young men. Better to be faithful in a hamlet over 2 or 3 score of people than to be unfaithful in a great city parish with thousands perishing in consequence. Better to be faithful in a cottage meeting speaking of Christ crucified to 100 villagers than to be unfaithful in a great building where thousands congregate." So a faithful servant was just faithful. He's saying it wasn't necessarily these guys were super talented and really good and famous people and just these big-time leaders or whatever. May have been. I mean, we don't know. But that's not what he described them as. He described them as faithful. Faithful. They were there and they did it. We also see the same reward for these two. And you see kind of some of these how do you want to call it? Kind of like paradoxes. We see them in other parables where there's people that came and worked for a man for different parts of the day, but they all got paid the same thing. Here they got the same reward, the identical reward. They both doubled their money, sure, but I don't think that was the point of it. But they were given different amounts, but they were given the same reward. You've been faithful, I will set you over more, and enter into the joy of your master. The joy of your master is also, to me, sounds like kind of a sense of heaven. This is something that he's inviting them into, not just like giving them, here, you're going to be happy. But no, come with me, like come to my place. Like the joy of the master is something that belongs to the master and is there. And he has invited his servants into that, to be part of that, to share with him. So to me, that just sounds like a really good picture of what heaven is as part of that reward. And as these individuals are coming, as these individuals are coming, all 3 servants, notice that he judges them individually, not as a group. It's individual faithfulness. Very specific. God's not going to ask you what your church did. He's going to ask you what you did personally. We each have a personal account before God. Verse 24, let's get to the third servant. Said, he also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. Well, this is where the confusion and the interesting thoughts enter in. What was this guy thinking? Like, what was he thinking? What is he even trying to say here? So he starts off by saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man. And my first thought was, a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. Like, that doesn't sound like a very nice person. Like, is that describing the master? Is that describing who God is? It sounds like it's someone who takes advantage of his workers, maybe. Prophets in many different places where people normally don't. I don't know, it just seemed a little confusing. There was even some other comments about it. Guy named Bruce says, a hard man, grasping, ungenerous, taking all to himself, offering no inducements to his servants. Another guy, F.B. Myers, says, express the thinking of this servant. It's saying, I can do very little. It will not make much difference if I do nothing. I shall not be missed. My tiny push is not needed to turn the scale. That one there really stuck out to me. I was like, we are taught in the scriptures about reaping and sowing. That's a law that is true. You reap what you sow. And here it's saying the opposite. The master's kind of the opposite, right? So maybe the servant was thinking that and realizing that this was a hard, just master, but he was all-powerful. Like he was omnipotent. Like he was God. Like he could reap where he did not sow. Basically all-powerful, like beyond the laws that we're used to. Maybe he was thinking, God's so big, he can do whatever he wants. He can reap and harvest wherever he wants. What difference does it make what I do? I've got this here, and it's not dependent on me. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm just thinking out loud. It could have been what he was thinking. But it also said he was afraid. So there's something to it too there, something to a fear. I definitely think he didn't have a proper fear of his master, but probably a fear of risk or failure, right? What if I lose it? Like, I don't want to lose this. Like, he was ultimately playing safe, like the ultimate playing safe example. Bury this thing, just keep it safe, don't lose it. We know when we find out that's a very bad strategy, but I think he could have been thinking along those lines. Poole says as well that it is the genius of wicked men to lay the blame of their miscarriages upon others, oftentimes upon God himself. So it kind of sounds like he was blaming God here in a way, or his master, by saying, you're a hard man, like, don't be unreasonable. I'm doing what I can here. Yeah, so many things. I think Les said in Sunday school, what do you do when you can't blame anyone else? Well, you can blame God. That's what some people do as well. So I think the servant may have been doing some of that. This very last line is kind of an interesting one where he says, here you have what is yours. I don't know, almost sounds a little proud there too, right? He has got this whole mixture of feelings. He's afraid. He knows the master's a hard man, but he's like, here, you have what is yours. It's almost like he was happy that he didn't lose it. He was proud to give it back to him. There's no gain or anything to it, but it was still there. And so he sounded kind of happy about that. Here, you have what is yours. He did recognize that it belonged to the master. Some people don't even do that. A lot of people, and I can fall into this trap, and I know many Christians do as well. We understand that we receive so many things, so many blessings and resources from God, but then we feel like they're ours, and we use them like they're ours. How do we treat them? How do we live with the resources we've been given? Do we actually live in a way that we are stewards of something that is not ours? Many people don't. But this servant, small credit to him, understood that they were still his masters. All right, let's go on. Let's finish off here, verse 26 to 30. But his master answered him, "You wicked and slothful servant." Some translations say lazy. "You wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So here's kind of another hard part of the story. The master's got a very direct, very harsh answer, judgment, statement on this third servant. Not happy with him at all. It's just a lot of harsh words in here. But they're true. And this is what he's saying. I mean, he's not beating around the bush here at all. How often do we think of laziness as a sin? He called him lazy. I mean, this is not just a guy who did a little thing wrong, but a big thing wrong. Wicked and lazy servant. Proverbs 13:4, "The soul of the lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich." Do we see laziness as a real sin? Do we see that as an opposite of, being faithful, looking at what the other two servants did and how they were faithful and how this one was not faithful? He said, "Yeah, you knew who I was. Like, you knew I'm all powerful, whatever I reap where I do not sow." He pointed that right back at the guy, said, "You knew that. You should have known better. You should have done something." He said, "Put it in the bank and even let it make some interest. Gain a little bit on it." Here again, he's not after a dollar amount that he specifies. I doubt interest would have doubled the money. It sure doesn't today. But it's something. It's something that's better than nothing. Like he said, you could have done the very least you could have done, put it in the bank and gain a little bit of interest on it. But no, you didn't even do that. So in verse 29, where it says, it talks about, to who has been given, more will be given, or to everyone who has, more will be given, there will be an abundance. That's a common theme we also see through other parables. Kingdom of heaven, this multiplying, this growing, this fruitful harvest, this growth. But one who has not, he will take it away. And here you can say, well, the one who has not, what do you mean? The servant did have one. Like, this sounds a little contradictory, and you kind of jump around and dance around these words, and hard to figure out what it means. And I read another thought or explanation on it that made sense to me too. It says, there are those who have things, like the servant with 1 talent, but hold them in such a way it is as if they have nothing. He treated it as if he had nothing, buried in the ground, out of sight, wasn't using it. You might as well not have had it. Would have made no difference. People definitely treat their resources and things they have sometimes as if they don't have anything. And so I think that's what he's talking about there. Meyer says again, another quote, he says, "We need not wait for the great future to obtain this multiplication or withdrawal of our talents. They are already waxing and waning in our hands." The resources that we have today, every day, we're continually using them. They're already increasing and decreasing depending on how we use them, depending on how faithful we are with them. And finally, he says, get the servant into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Again, pretty harsh judgment, but Jesus talked a lot about judgment. Just some very, very hard things, right? It's hard for us to grasp. And as the joy of the master, to me, feels like a real sense of heaven, this here feels like a real sense of hell, the opposite, like a place of punishment. And it's awful. Like, you just don't want to think about that, right? But it's there and it's real, and Jesus talked about it. So I definitely think it's not something we, should avoid or ignore. I very much believe it's better to live with our eyes on heaven, the cat and dog theology, focus our life toward heaven rather than away from hell. Don't live in a way that we're trying to avoid hell. Live in a way that we're trying to pursue God and pursue heaven and look towards that. But it is there, and it's a true part of the story. It also, just shows the importance of the wrongdoing of the servant, like how important it was, like our choices and our faithfulness and our laziness has real implications in our life, real implications. I believe Jesus was teaching that. One thing that helps me in thinking about these just judgment and that thinking is to understand that God is a faithful God. He is a true and faithful judge. And I'm really thankful he is, and not anybody else. God is the judge, and so that can put fear in a lot of people, but I don't think it should ultimately put fear in us. But just, a level of trust that he's going to judge justly. He's going to judge true and rightly. So, I think the main point of this parable is about our readiness for Jesus' return. It is very much determined by the stewardship of the resources that he has given us. What do we do with what we've been given? We've been given lots. I feel like we'd be the servant with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 talents, maybe, in certain ways. You can take that many different ways, but we've been given a lot. What are we doing with our knowledge? What are we doing with our time? What are we doing with our money, our abilities? The sins of omission, what we don't do, may be more dangerous than the sins of commission, what we do. And that was a good reminder for me to, just in my thinking and mentality in life, it can be just as wrong what I am not doing as opposed to what I may be doing incorrectly. Hope that makes sense. What we do not do, to him that knows to do well, to do right, and does not do it, is a real thing. So, an interesting story, a familiar story, couple things that you kind of have to think through and may not make sense all the way, but to me, faithfulness really stuck out here. Just what does it mean to be faithful? What are you going to do today and tomorrow to be faithful? Faithful with where you're at, faithful with what God has given you. We know that faithfulness is a fruit of the Spirit, and I also believe it is a gift of the Spirit. Faithfulness in the Bible, I think, I didn't study this really long, but I think I saw someone mention that it's first mentioned, faith or faithfulness is first mentioned in the Bible in connection with Abraham. And in Genesis 15:6, it says, "And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness." That's right after God promised a son to Abraham and told him to count the stars in the sky. He said, those are going to be how many descendants you have. And Abraham believed the Lord. And the word believe there means to have faith. To have faith and be faithful. We can see that all through Abraham's life. He he walked the walk. He believed God, and he acted like it. Hebrews 11:8, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive his inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. But he heard God, he believed him, and he acted accordingly. So, great faithfulness in Abraham. And you can say the whole Bible is really a story. The whole Bible is a pile of stories about people that were faithful or not faithful, is one simple way you could put it, I think. I want to close and leave you with this verse here out of Proverbs 3, verse 3. It says, "Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man." Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan.